She fell down the stairs and believed it would be the end of her strength. When she opened her eyes, she was in the arms of the most desired farmer. His touch made her heart race uncontrollably. The simple barn became the setting for a forbidden passion. What do you think will happen in this story? Comment and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. Victoria Davis ran through the streets of New York as if the devil himself was chasing her. The heavy rain lashed at her face, mixing with the tears she could no longer contain. Her once elegant clothes, now soaked, betrayed a woman in flight. Her cell phone rang incessantly, but she knew that answering would only mean hearing more. Accusations, more lies, more betrayals. She glanced quickly at the headline on an abandoned newspaper at a stand. Executive of Sunrise Construction involved in million-dollar fraud. Her name and photo displayed as if she were a criminal. Victoria had always been a determined woman. Graduating with distinction in business administration, she had carved out a space in a world dominated by men. At 35, she was the financial director of Sunrise Construction, one of the largest companies in the country. But her success bothered people, especially Richard Montgomery, the owner's son and vice president, who saw her competence as a threat to his ambitions. Richard had manipulated documents, diverted funds, and when the scheme was discovered, placed all the blame on Victoria. Without evidence to defend herself, abandoned by those she considered friends, and with her reputation destroyed, she sold what little she had, stored the money in a worn backpack, and left without a destination. That New York she had once loved now suffocated her with its skyscrapers, its noise, and its merciless judgment. After 3 days of traveling on intercity buses, always afraid of being recognized, she reached the Hudson Valley in upstate New York. The region, with its small towns, green mountains, and fresh air, seemed like a temporary refuge. When the last bus dropped her off on a dirt road, it was already night. Her money reserves were almost gone, and hunger was gnawing at her. Walking aimlessly, she spotted a light in the distance between the trees. It was a sizable rural property. An old manor house, typical of the century-old farms of the region, stood imposingly, surrounded by well-kept gardens and a small plantation. Victoria hesitated. Perhaps she could ask for help, a little food, information about somewhere to stay. But the fear of being recognized paralyzed her. She decided to just rest for a few hours in what appeared to be an abandoned barn on the outskirts of the property. The barn, a wooden construction with zinc roofing, housed old agricultural equipment and bales of hay. Exhausted, Victoria climbed a wooden ladder to the mezzanine where hay was stored. The smell was sweet and comforting, reminding her of visits to her grandparents' farm as a child. Before she could think about the next step, her body gave in to the accumulated exhaustion of days. Her eyes grew heavy, her legs weakened, and the ladder, already worn by time, gave way under her weight. The fall was violent and unexpected. Her body hit the packed earth floor, and the world around her spun. The last thing she saw, before darkness enveloped her, was the figure of a tall man hastily entering the barn, attracted by the noise. Matthew Richards awoke with a start at the crash coming from the equipment barn. Since losing Julia, his wife, in a tragic accident 5 years earlier, his sleep had been light and troubled. As the owner of Hope Farm, one of the few properties still producing quality crops in the Hudson Valley, he had responsibilities that couldn't wait until dawn. He quickly pulled on pants, put on his boots, and grabbed a flashlight. Before leaving, he silently passed by the room of Lucy, his 8-year-old daughter, who was sleeping deeply. The girl, since her mother's absence, had become extremely reserved, speaking only when necessary, and showing distrust even toward Mrs. Zelda, the housekeeper who took care of the home. The path to the barn was short, but the rain made visibility difficult. Matthew, at 40, maintained the athletic build of someone who works the land. His dark hair already showed some silver strands at the temples, and his face, once always smiling, now carried a serious, almost austere expression. His unshaven appearance completed the image of a man who, though young, carried the weight of many losses. Upon entering the barn, the flashlight revealed an unexpected scene: an unconscious woman fallen on the ground with the broken ladder beside her. For a moment, Matthew was paralyzed. He hadn't received visitors in years, especially strangers, and the presence of this woman was completely out of the ordinary. He approached cautiously, illuminating her face. Despite the scratches and dirt, he could see she was young and beautiful. Her clothes, though soaked and dirty, were fine, indicating she wasn't just any wanderer. He lightly touched her neck, feeling her pulse. She was alive, but unconscious. A part of him, the part that had become distrustful and bitter after so much pain, suggested calling the authorities. After all, she could be anyone, a thief, a fugitive. But something in the delicate features of this woman awakened a compassion in Matthew that he thought was dormant. Carefully, he took her in his arms. She was light, and her body, though cold from the rain, conveyed a fragility that moved him. He carried her to the main house, entering through the back to avoid waking Lucy. Mrs. Zelda, who was still in the kitchen preparing bread for the next day, almost dropped the bowl of dough when she saw Matthew carrying a stranger. "Good heavens, Mr. Richards, who is this young lady?" "I don't know, Zelda. I found her unconscious in the barn. Looks like she fell from the mezzanine ladder." "But what was she doing there? Could she be dangerous?" "Look at her, Zelda. Do you really think someone in this state poses a danger? Let's take care of her first, then find out who she is." Matthew carried Victoria to one of the guest rooms that had remained closed for years. Mrs. Zelda, although reluctant, helped remove the stranger's wet clothes and dress her in a clean nightgown. They cleaned her wounds, particularly a cut on her forehead that was bleeding quite a bit, and covered her with warm blankets. Matthew observed her for a moment, intrigued. Who could this woman be? What had brought her to his property so far from the city? His instinct told him she was running from something or someone. "Mr. Richards, don't you think we should call Dr. Joseph? This young lady might have broken something in the fall. If she doesn't improve by tomorrow morning, we'll call. For now, let's let her rest." When they left the room, they didn't notice that, from the dark hallway, small curious eyes observed the entire scene. Lucy, awakened by the unusual movement in the always silent house, peeked through the door crack. The presence of this stranger, in her home, in her father's arms, awakened in the girl a mixture of curiosity and jealousy that she hadn't felt in a long time. The next morning, when the first rays of sun crossed the curtains of the room, Victoria opened her eyes, disoriented. She looked around, not recognizing where she was. The room was spacious, with old but well-preserved furniture. The walls, painted a soft yellow, displayed some paintings of rural landscapes. She tried to get up, but a sharp pain in her head made her retreat. It was then that the door slowly opened, and Matthew entered carrying a tray with tea, bread, and fresh fruit. The look they exchanged at that first conscious moment was intense and loaded with unasked questions. Victoria instinctively pulled the sheet up to her chin, feeling vulnerable. Matthew, in turn, felt something strange in his chest, a tightness long forgotten. It was as if this stranger, with her frightened brown eyes, had awakened in him an emotion he thought was buried along with Julia. "Good morning," said Matthew, placing the tray on the dresser. "How are you feeling?" Victoria adjusted herself in the bed, still confused by the situation. "Where am I? Who are you?" "My name is Matthew Richards. This is Hope Farm. I found you unconscious in the barn last night after a fall. I brought you to the house to take care of your wounds." Victoria touched her forehead, feeling the bandage. Fragments of the previous night began to return, the escape, the rain, the barn, the ladder giving way under her feet. She looked at her own hands, now clean, and realized she was wearing a nightgown that wasn't hers. "My backpack," she said, suddenly alarmed. "Where is my backpack?" "It's there," Matthew pointed to a corner of the room. "We didn't touch anything beyond what was necessary to take care of you. Mrs. Zelda, our housekeeper, helped change your wet clothes." Victoria relaxed a little, but kept her guard up. In recent days, she had learned the hard way that trusting people could be dangerous. Even so, something in this man's gaze conveyed a security she couldn't explain. "Thank you," she finally said. "Sorry for the trouble. I didn't intend to invade your property." "Don't worry about that now. Eat something, regain your strength. We'll talk later." When Matthew left the room, Victoria carefully got up and went to the backpack. She confirmed that everything was there, the few belongings, documents, and the money she had managed to gather before fleeing. She felt relieved but still uneasy. She couldn't stay here. This man seemed kind, but how long would it take until he discovered who she was, until newspapers arrived with her face plastered on the headlines? After eating a little and dressing in the clothes she found clean and folded at the foot of the bed, Victoria decided she would leave as soon as she thanked them for their hospitality. She left the room and found herself in a wide corridor, decorated with old photographs of the farm and the family. In one of them, Matthew smiled alongside a beautiful brown-haired woman and a small girl. They looked happy. Following the sound of voices, she reached the kitchen. It was a welcoming space, with a large wooden table in the center, a wood stove and old cabinets. Matthew was sitting drinking coffee, while a motherly-looking woman stirred something on the stove. Beside him, a girl of about 8 years old looked at Victoria with a mixture of curiosity and distrust. "Ah, you're up," said Matthew, indicating a chair. "Come join us. This is Mrs. Zelda, who has been taking care of me and Lucy since forever. And this is my daughter, Lucy." "Good morning," replied Victoria, sitting down shyly. "I am—" She hesitated. Would it be prudent to say her real name? What if they recognized her? "Victoria," she finally completed. "Victoria Davis." "It's good to see you're better, young lady," said Mrs. Zelda, placing a cup of coffee in front of her. "You gave us quite a scare yesterday." Lucy remained silent, observing the stranger with intensity. Her eyes, identical to her father's, seemed to analyze Victoria's every movement. "I really appreciate everything you've done for me," said Victoria, looking at the coffee in her cup. "But I need to continue on my way. I've already abused your hospitality too much." "And where are you going?" asked Matthew. The question caught her off guard. Where would she go, really? She had no destination, no concrete plans beyond fleeing and hiding. "I haven't decided yet," she answered honestly. "Then there's no rush," said Matthew, with a kindness that disconcerted her. "Besides, Dr. Joseph will come to examine you today. You had a serious concussion. You need to rest." Victoria wanted to protest, but the pain in her head returned as a reminder of her current fragility. Perhaps it would be sensible to accept the offer and regain her strength before continuing her journey. "Just for one more day, then," she reluctantly agreed. After coffee, Matthew took Victoria to see the property. Hope Farm stretched over several acres, with crops on the gentle slopes, various fruit orchards and a small dairy farm. The main house, built in the late 19th century by Matthew's great-grandparents, preserved the original architecture of the region's farms with wide porches, high ceilings and noble woods. "My family has been on this land for 5 generations, explained Matthew as they walked through the gardens. "It used to be one of the largest producers in the region, but times have changed. Now we maintain a smaller production, more focused on quality than quantity." "It's a beautiful place," observed Victoria, breathing in the fresh air. "So different from the city." "Have you always lived in the city?" "Yes, in New York. I was born and raised there." Victoria stopped in front of a tree laden with berries. "I used to visit my grandparents in the countryside when I was a child, but that was a long time ago." Matthew noticed the shadow that passed over her face when she mentioned the past. There were mysteries in this woman, pains that he recognized well. He decided not to press. "You can pick some if you want," he said, indicating the berries. "Lucy loves them. Maybe that will help break the ice with her. She doesn't talk much, does she?" "Not since we lost her mother, Julia." Matthew paused, as if the mere name of his wife still caused pain. "She had an accident 5 years ago. Lucy was only 3 at the time. It was difficult for all of us." "I'm sorry," said Victoria, genuinely moved. "Life goes on, doesn't it? We have to go on with it, no matter how impossible it sometimes seems." Something in the way he said that resonated deeply with Victoria. They were 2 people, broken by fate, trying to rebuild the pieces of their lives. In the afternoon, Dr. Joseph, a white-haired gentleman with gentle manners, came to examine Victoria. He diagnosed a mild concussion and recommended rest for at least a week. The news fell like a bombshell on Victoria. A week? It was too much time to stay in one place exposed, but when she tried to protest, both the doctor and Matthew were adamant. "It's not negotiable," said Matthew after the doctor left. "You need to recover completely before traveling. Besides," he added, with a discreet smile, "I think Mrs. Zelda has already taken a liking to you. She's been saying this house needs more feminine presence." During the days that followed, Victoria gradually integrated into the farm's routine. She still maintained a certain emotional distance, aware that her stay was temporary, but she couldn't help feeling attracted to the peace of that place and the simplicity of life there. She helped Mrs. Zelda in the kitchen, learning traditional local recipes. She met the farm employees, simple men and women who worked the land with devotion. And slowly, with patience and small gestures, she began to get closer to Lucy. The girl, initially skittish, began to accompany Victoria in her daily tasks, first observing from afar, then participating timidly. It was during a rainy afternoon while teaching Lucy to make cinnamon cookies that Victoria heard the girl's voice for the first time. "Are you going to leave like Mom did?" The question, asked in a low voice as they cut the dough into star shapes, caught Victoria off guard. She felt a lump in her throat as she realized the depth of that child's pain. "Your mother didn't want to leave, Lucy. Sometimes sad things happen that we can't control. But you're going to leave because you want to, aren't you?" Victoria looked into those childish eyes, so full of fear of abandonment, and felt her heart tighten. How to explain that she needed to leave not by her own will, but by necessity? How to say that her past was pursuing her, and that staying could bring danger to that family that had so generously welcomed her? "I don't know what will happen, Lucy, but while I'm here, I promise I'll always be by your side." It was a cautious promise, the only one she could make honestly. Lucy seemed to accept it, turning her attention back to the cookies. But something had changed between them. A bridge was beginning to form over the abyss of distrust. That night, after Lucy went to bed, Victoria stayed on the porch, contemplating the starry sky. It was a vision that the big city, with its lights and pollution, had never allowed her to fully appreciate. Matthew joined her, bringing 2 cups of tea. "Lucy spoke to you today," he said, not as a question but a statement. "How do you know?" "I saw her smiling while eating the cookies. It's been a long time since I've seen her smile like that." They remained silent for a moment, just appreciating the peace of the rural night. "You never told me what brought you here, Victoria. What are you running from?" The direct question startled her. She turned to him, ready to deny, to invent any story. But upon meeting those sincere eyes, something inside her faltered. She was tired of lying, of hiding. Perhaps just for one night, she could allow herself the luxury of truth. "False accusations," she finally said, choosing her words carefully. "I worked at a large construction company in New York. I was the financial director, the owner's son. He embezzled money and manipulated documents to place the blame on me." Matthew listened in silence, his face illuminated only by the soft light coming from the living room. He showed no judgment, only genuine attention. "I couldn't prove my innocence. The evidence was fabricated to perfection. I lost everything. My job, my reputation, my friends. Even my family began to doubt me." Victoria took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past weeks. "So I ran. I had nowhere to go. I just knew I needed to disappear for a while. And do. You intend to prove your innocence? How? Richard Montgomery has money, power, connections. I have nothing." Matthew remained silent for a few moments, as if pondering her words. "I believe you," he said simply. 3 words. Just 3 words that Victoria hadn't heard in so long, she had almost forgotten what it was like to be believed. She felt her eyes burn with contained tears. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough. I've seen how you treat Lucy, how you help Mrs. Zelda, how you worry about not being a burden. Dishonest people don't act like that." Victoria couldn't hold back the tears. She cried silently, releasing part of the tension she carried. Matthew didn't move to comfort her physically, giving her the space she needed. But his presence was in itself a comfort. "Now I understand why you're always looking over your shoulder," he commented when she calmed down. "But you're safe here, Victoria. No one will find you at Hope Farm." From that day on, something changed in the dynamic between them. There was a mutual trust, a silent understanding. Victoria began to allow herself small moments of happiness, as if testing the waters of a new life. Gradually, she learned more about Matthew, his love for the land, his dedication to his daughter, his passion for history books. She discovered that he had studied agronomy in the city, but returned to the farm after Julia's departure, seeking a healthier environment to raise Lucy. As the days passed, Victoria's presence subtly transformed the atmosphere of the farm. The house, once silent and somber, began to come alive. She brought music back, playing the old vinyl records she found stored away. She replanted the backyard garden with aromatic herbs and colorful flowers. She organized the library books that had been abandoned, small changes that didn't go unnoticed by anyone, especially Matthew. On a sunny afternoon, as Victoria helped Lucy with her homework on the porch, Matthew observed them discreetly from the door. Seeing his daughter interacting, asking questions, even occasionally laughing, was like witnessing a miracle. Since Julia's departure, Lucy had closed herself in a shell, as if fearing that any demonstration of joy would be a betrayal of her mother's memory. "Victoria, look!" exclaimed Lucy, showing a blue butterfly that had landed on her notebook. "That's a morpho, one of the most beautiful butterflies in America," explained Victoria. "They say that when a blue butterfly lands near you, it's a sign of good luck." "Really?" The girl's eyes sparkled. "My grandmother always said that, and her grandmother before her. It must be true, don't you think?" Lucy smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her usually serious little face. At that moment, Matthew knew something irreversible was happening. Victoria was no longer just a temporary guest. She was becoming an essential part of that small family unit. The next morning, when Matthew went to town to get supplies for the farm, he stopped at the post office to check for mail. Among bills and agricultural magazines, there was a New York newspaper that the post office owner, Mr. January, always set aside for him. "It arrived 3 days late, but I thought you'd like to see the news from the city," said the elderly man, adjusting his glasses on his nose. "Thank you, Mr. January. How's your blood pressure?" "Under control, thank God, and thanks to that tea Mrs. Zelda recommended." Matthew stored the newspaper without giving it much importance. He only opened it when he stopped for lunch at a small diner, and that's when his heart almost stopped. On the third page, a small news item but with a photo he would recognize anywhere. "Police continue search for executive accused of fraud." The photo showed Victoria, with shorter and neater hair, but unmistakably her. The text mentioned that Victoria Davis, former financial director of Sunrise Construction, had disappeared after being accused of embezzling millions in a fraudulent scheme. The authorities suspected she had fled the country with the money. Matthew read the news 3 times, trying to reconcile the image of the woman described there, a criminal on the run, with the Victoria he had come to know in recent weeks. Kind, hard-working, honest. His mind went back to the conversation they had on the porch. She had told the truth, but had she told everything? Upon returning to the farm, he found Victoria and Lucy in the orchard, picking oranges. The girl ran between the trees, more animated than he had seen her in years, while Victoria held a basket already almost full of fruit. The afternoon sun created a golden halo around them, like a perfect pastoral painting. "Dad, look how many oranges we picked. Victoria's going to make fresh juice for dinner." "That's great, honey," he replied automatically, his eyes fixed on Victoria. She immediately noticed something was wrong. "Lucy, why don't you take some of these oranges to Mrs. Zelda? Tell her, we're coming soon." When the girl moved away, Victoria approached Matthew, concerned. Did something happen? He took the folded newspaper from his pocket and handed it to her, open to the page with the news. Victoria immediately turned pale, her fingers gripping the paper so tightly they almost tore it. "Matthew, You told me you were unjustly accused. You didn't mention that the police are after you." "I didn't know." Her eyes filled with tears. "I swear I didn't know they had involved the police. I thought it would just be an internal scandal, that they would fire me, destroy my reputation, but not this. And the money. The article says you fled with millions." "It's a lie. I didn't take a cent that wasn't mine, just what I had in my account, my savings. You can check my backpack, there's nothing there but a few clothes and little money." Matthew observed the genuine desperation in her eyes. Part of him wanted to believe blindly, but another part, the one that had become cautious after so many disillusions, demanded more. If what you say is true, why don't you turn yourself in and prove your innocence? With what evidence? Richard destroyed everything that could exonerate me. It's my word against his, the owner's son, with the best lawyers money can buy. The silence that followed was tense, loaded with unexpressed doubts. Finally, Matthew folded the newspaper and stored it again. I won't turn you in if that's what you fear. I still believe you, Victoria. But I need to protect Lucy. If the police come here, I understand. I'll leave today. No, the vehemence in his own voice surprised him. I mean, it doesn't have to be now. This region is isolated. We rarely receive visitors from outside. We can think of something. The relief on Victoria's face was evident, but there was still apprehension in her eyes. Why are you doing this for me, Matthew? He wasn't sure of the answer himself. Was it just compassion? Or was there something more, feelings he dared not name, growing silently? Each day, everyone deserves a second chance, he answered simply. In the days that followed, the shadow of that news hung over them, but it didn't prevent life from continuing its course at Hope Farm. Victoria, now more aware of the seriousness of her situation, became even more cautious. She avoided going to town, used hats and scarves when she needed to leave the property, changed her appearance by cutting her hair even shorter. But, paradoxically, while hiding from the outside world, she opened up more and more to Matthew and Lucy. The nights on the porch became a silent ritual between her and Matthew. They talked about books, old dreams, small joys of everyday life. He told her about his childhood on the farm, family traditions, the challenges of keeping alive a business that seemed increasingly anachronistic in the modern world. She shared stories of her life in New York, her studies, her struggles as a woman in a corporate environment dominated by men. On one of those nights, when a gentle rain fell on the crops, accompanying the conversation with its rhythmic tapping, on the roof Matthew asked, "You never married or had someone special?" Victoria smiled melancholically, stirring the tea with the spoon. "There was someone, a long time ago. We were young, still in college. I loved him deeply, but our careers took different paths. He went to work abroad, I stayed. We promised to wait, to maintain the relationship at a distance, but life happened." "He met someone else?" "No, I was the one who gave up. I immersed myself in work, in the ambition to grow professionally. The calls became rarer, the visits shorter. One day I realized we were just prolonging something that had already ended. It was a mutual decision without hard feelings. But since then, I've never allowed myself to get so deeply involved." "And now, after everything that's happened, do you still think about going back to that life?" The question caught Victoria off guard. Until a few weeks ago, her answer would have been an immediate yes. Her entire identity was tied to her career, her professional achievements. But now, after experiencing another rhythm of life, other forms of fulfillment, "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Part of me still wants to clear my name, recover what was unjustly taken from me. But another part—" She left the sentence unfinished, looking at the fields that extended beyond the porch, now enveloped by the darkness of night. Matthew followed, her gaze as if also contemplating unspoken possibilities. Life at Hope Farm had established a comforting routine for Victoria. Mornings began early with birdsong and the aroma of fresh coffee prepared by Mrs. Zelda. After breakfast with Matthew and Lucy, she devoted herself to tasks she had voluntarily taken on, helping in the garden, organizing the farm's accounting, an area where her professional experience proved valuable, and assisting Lucy with her studies. The afternoons were usually reserved for activities with the girl, who became more talkative and expressive each day. Together they explored corners of the property, invented games, and read stories under the generous shade of the mango trees. For Victoria, who had never had children and had always prioritized her career, this companionship revealed a maternal facet she didn't know existed within herself. On a particularly hot afternoon, Victoria decided to take Lucy to the creek, that cut through the property. It was an enchanting place, with crystal-clear waters running over smooth stones, surrounded by leafy trees that formed a natural cathedral of shade and coolness. Sitting by the water's edge, with their feet dipped in the gentle current, they were chatting about simple things when Lucy asked an unexpected question. "Victoria, do you like my dad?" The question, asked with disconcerting childlike frankness, caught Victoria off guard. She felt her face warm, and it wasn't from the day's heat. "Of course I like him. Your dad is a very good man who helped me when I needed it most." "No, not like that," insisted Lucy, with the wisdom that sometimes only children possess. "Do you like him the way Mum liked him, in that special way?" Victoria observed their reflection in the water, rippling gently. How to explain to a child feelings that she herself was still trying to decipher? Yes, something was growing inside her, something that went beyond gratitude or friendship. Matthew, with his firm gentleness, his integrity, his devotion to his daughter and the land, had awakened emotions in her that she thought were dormant. But there were so many impediments, so many complications. "It's complicated, Lucy," she finally answered. "Adults sometimes have difficulty understanding their own feelings. But it's not hard. Either you like someone or you don't." Victoria smiled at that simplicity. "Maybe you're right. And yes, I do like your dad, in that special way, but don't tell him. It's our secret, okay?" Lucy smiled, a luminous smile that lit up her entire childish face. "He likes you too. I see how he looks at you when you're not watching." That seemingly innocent conversation planted a seed of restlessness in Victoria. She began to notice small details she had previously ignored. How Matthew always seemed to find reasons to be nearby, how his eyes lingered on her when he thought he wasn't being observed, how their hands occasionally touched by accident during shared tasks. For her part, Victoria strived to maintain a prudent emotional distance. Her situation was precarious. She was hiding, a fugitive. What future could she offer to Matthew and Lucy? And even if she could clear her name someday, they would be worlds too different. She, an urban executive, he, a farmer rooted in rural traditions. But the heart has its own reasons that reason knows nothing of. And despite all the logical barriers, feelings grew, nourished by daily coexistence, by conversations on the porch, by small gestures of mutual care. It was during the traditional community summer festival that something decisively changed. The neighboring Johnson farm hosted the celebration that brought together families from throughout the region. Initially, Victoria was reluctant to participate, fearing being recognized, but Lucy begged so much, and the idea of staying alone at the farm while everyone had fun seemed so desolate that she finally gave in. With her now short hair, wearing a simple dress borrowed from Mrs. Zelda, and a straw hat that partially shadowed her face, she convinced herself the risk was minimal. The festival was exactly like those she had attended in childhood, colorful, banners, crackling bonfire, booths with typical foods and games, traditional music played by local musicians. Lucy, dressed for the occasion, ran happily between the booths, trying all the treats. Victoria observed her from a distance, feeling a pang of melancholy at the thought that soon she would have to leave all this behind. "A penny for your thoughts," said Matthew, approaching with 2 cups of mulled cider. He looked particularly handsome that night, wearing a checkered shirt and jeans that accentuated his masculine figure. The familiar smell of his cologne, mixed with the aromas of the festival, caused butterflies in Victoria's stomach. "I was thinking about how happy Lucy seems," she replied, accepting the warm aromatic drink. "Thanks to you," he said, sitting beside her on the rustic bench. "Since you arrived, you've brought life back to both of us." The comment, made with simplicity but loaded with meaning, hung between them like an unspoken promise. Victoria felt her heart race. "You've both brought life back to me too, Matthew. I don't know what would have become of me if I hadn't found Hope Farm." "Maybe it was destiny," he suggested, his eyes reflecting the flames of the bonfire. "Some people enter our lives by chance and end up being exactly what we needed without knowing." They remained silent, observing the couples who were dancing animatedly around the bonfire. The music, cheerful and nostalgic at the same time, enveloped the night in an almost magical atmosphere. "Would you like to dance?" invited Matthew, extending his hand. "I don't know if it's a good idea," hesitated Victoria. "What if someone recognizes me?" "No one here reads city newspapers. And even if they did, they're all too busy having fun to notice any resemblance to a small photo in an old news story." The argument was reasonable, and the desire to accept that extended hand was greater than prudence. Victoria let herself be led to the area where other couples were dancing. Matthew guided her with confidence, his firm hands on her waist, leading her through traditional steps she vaguely remembered from childhood. They laughed when she missed the sequence, drew closer. When the music slowed, it was as if the world around them had disappeared, leaving only the two of them connected by rhythm, by touch, by gaze. "You dance well for a farmer," she teased, "and you learn quickly for a big city executive," he replied, making her spin. When far, the music ended. They remained for a moment standing in the middle of the yard, still close, still connected by something greater than the dance. Matthew looked at her with intensity, as if wanting to memorize every detail of her face. Slowly, leaning forward, their lips almost touching. "Dad! Victoria! Come see the children's square dance!" Lucy appeared between them, breaking the moment, pulling them by the hand toward another corner of the festival, where the children were organizing for a performance. They exchanged a knowing look, both disappointed and amused by the interruption. The rest of the night passed in an atmosphere of contained expectation. Something had changed, an invisible line had been crossed, and they both knew it. On the way back to the farm, with Lucy asleep in the back seat of the pickup truck, the silence between them was eloquent, full of unexplored possibilities. When they arrived, Matthew carried the sleeping Lucy to her room. Victoria headed to the porch, her favorite place in the house. The night was exceptionally starry, the air perfumed with the smell of earth moistened by dew. A few minutes later, Matthew joined her, bringing 2 cups of coffee. "I already missed the cider," she joked, accepting the hot drink. "We have cinnamon and cloves in the pantry if you want to improvise," he replied, sitting closer than usual. "Matthew," began Victoria, feeling they needed to address what had almost happened at the festival. "About tonight." "We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," he gently interrupted. "I know your situation is complicated, that you have many concerns. I don't want to add one more." "It's not that," she said, placing the cup on the table. "It's that I'm afraid of what I feel for you, afraid of what might happen. I can't offer stability or guarantees. My future is too uncertain." "The future is always uncertain, Victoria. I learned that in the hardest way when I lost Julia. We were planning a whole life together, and in an instant, everything changed." She felt the weight of those words, the pain still present even after so many years. "I can't promise I'll stay forever," she said with tears in her eyes. "But I can promise that while I'm here, every moment will be true." Matthew touched her face gently, wiping away a solitary tear with his thumb. "That's all I ask. The now." And then, finally, without interruptions or hesitations, their lips met in a soft, delicate kiss, full of promises and uncertainties. It was like coming home after a long journey, like finding an oasis after crossing a desert. Victoria felt herself melt in that touch, her fears momentarily silenced by the strength of that feeling, both new and ancient at the same time. When they separated, they remained with their foreheads united, breathing the same air, absorbing the reality of that moment. "I'm scared, Matthew," she confessed in a whisper. "Afraid that this is just a dream, a pause before reality catches up with me again." "Then let's enjoy every instant of this dream," he replied, enveloping her in his arms. "Tomorrow will take care of itself." That night, under the starry sky of upstate New York, Victoria allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a possible future beyond flight and fear, a future where her heart, for so long dedicated only to work and ambition, could finally find peace in the arms of this man and in the love of that small family that destiny had placed in her path. Trainbier. Weeks that followed were the happiest Victoria had experienced in a long time. The relationship with Matthew flourished naturally, as if their souls had recognized each other after a long wait. There was no rush, no demands, just the pleasure of mutual discovery. Sunset walks through the fields, conversations that extended into the early hours, moments of shared silence that said more than 1,000 words. Lucy, far from feeling excluded, seemed to flourish along with this new family arrangement. The girl who rarely smiled before now filled the house with her crystalline laughter. She called Victoria Auntie, but the affection in her voice suggested a much deeper bond. Together, they created a flower garden beside the house, a colorful and vibrant space that symbolized the rebirth they all were experiencing. Victoria still worried about her past, still nervously checked each unfamiliar car that passed by the main road, still avoided appearing in photographs during community events. But the constant anxiety that had accompanied her since her flight from New York was slowly beginning to diminish, replaced by a cautious hope for the future. On a Sunday afternoon, after a special lunch prepared by Mrs. Zelda to celebrate the first successful harvest of the year, Matthew invited Victoria for a horseback ride. It was an activity he loved and hadn't practiced in a long time. Lucy would stay with Mrs. Zelda, preparing sweets for dessert. "I don't know if it's a good idea," hesitated Victoria. "I've never ridden a horse." "Then it's time to learn," he smiled, taking her hand. "I promise we'll go slowly. I want to show you a special place." The farm had 4 horses, all well treated and of docile temperament. Matthew chose for Victoria a gentle mare named Serena, with light coloring and gentle eyes. After a brief explanation on how to mount and hold the reins, they set off toward the hills that bordered the property. The day was perfect, blue sky dotted with white clouds, mild temperature, a soft breeze that carried the perfume of wildflowers. They rode slowly, with Matthew always attentive to Victoria's reactions, guiding her when necessary. She, initially tense, soon began to relax and appreciate the rhythmic cadence of the animal, the sensation of freedom that horseback riding provided. After about half an hour, they reached the top of a hill from where the entire expanse of Hope Farm and the neighboring properties could be seen. It was a breathtaking view, verdant fields, the river winding in the distance, the farm's main house with its red roof standing out in the landscape. "It's beautiful," murmured Victoria, dismounting with Matthew's help. "This is my favorite place on the entire property," he said, spreading a blanket over the grass and inviting her to sit. "I come here whenever I need to think, make important decisions, or simply find peace." They sat side by side in silence for a few minutes, just absorbing the magnitude of that vision. Matthew took Victoria's hand between his, caressing it gently. "Victoria, these last few months with you have been revealing. After Julia left, I thought I would never feel again what I'm feeling now." She turned to face him, her heart accelerating as she perceived the seriousness in his gaze. "Matthew, please let me finish," he asked gently. "I know your situation is complicated, that there are issues from your past still unresolved. But I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'll be by your side. I'm not asking for promises or guarantees. I just want you to know that this farm, this life we've built together, can be your permanent home, if you so desire." Victoria felt tears spring to her eyes. It was everything she secretly wanted to hear, and at the same time her greatest fear. How could she accept such an offer when her future was so uncertain? "And Lucy?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "She's already lost her mother once. What if I have to leave suddenly? I couldn't bear to hurt her." "Lucy loves you, Victoria. More than that, she trusts you, something she hasn't done with anyone since we lost Julia. Whatever the future holds, I believe it's better for her to have known the love you brought, even with all the risks." Victoria rested her head on Matthew's shoulder, allowing herself for a moment to dream about the possibility of a future there, in that piece of paradise. She imagined growing old on that farm, seeing Lucy grow up, perhaps having other children, building a full life far from the chaos of the big city. "I love you." "Matthew," she finally said, words she had kept inside for weeks. "And I love Lucy as if she were my own daughter." More than anything, I want this dream to be real, for us to be able to build something lasting together." "Then we will," he replied, kissing her softly. They remained there until sunset, making plans, sharing dreams, building castles in the air that, at that magical moment, seemed perfectly attainable. The sky was tinged with orange and pink when they decided to return to the farm, their hearts light as they hadn't felt in a long time. But fate, so often implacable, had other plans. As they approached the main house, they immediately perceived that something was wrong. An unfamiliar car, a luxury model with New York plates, was parked in the yard. Mrs. Zelda awaited them on the porch with a worried expression. "Thank God you've arrived," said the housekeeper as soon as she spotted them. "There's a man looking for you, Mr. Richards, says it's important." "Who is it?" asked Matthew, helping Victoria dismount, feeling the tension that immediately took hold of her body. He didn't say his name, just that he's from New York and needs to speak urgently with the farm owner. He's been in the living room for almost an hour drinking the coffee I offered. Victoria turned pale. "Matthew, I can't go in. If it's someone looking for me, stay out here with the horses," he decided, squeezing her hand reassuringly. "I'll see what this man wants. It probably has nothing to do with you." But they both knew the coincidence was too great to be ignored. Someone from New York arriving without warning, just when their relationship was reaching a new level. The fear Victoria had tried so hard to push away returned with full force, freezing her inside. Matthew entered the house trying to maintain calm. In the living room, a middle-aged man wearing an expensive suit and with the appearance of an executive was waiting patiently. Seeing Matthew, he stood up, extending his hand. "Mr. Richards? My name is Charles Edward Mendez, attorney for Sunrise Construction." Matthew's heart skipped a beat, so it was indeed related to Victoria. "How can I help you, Mr. Mendez?" "I'm looking for Victoria Davis, former financial director of the construction company. We have information that she may be in this region." "And why would she be on my farm?" The lawyer smiled, a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "I didn't say she would be specifically here. I'm visiting all properties in the region. New York isn't so far, and our investigators followed trails that lead to this area." Matthew maintained a neutral expression. Years of negotiations with coffee buyers had trained him well not to show emotions in tense situations. "I'm afraid I can't help you. I don't know any Victoria Davis." The lawyer took a photograph from the inside pocket of his jacket, extending it to Matthew. It was Victoria, with longer hair and elegant clothes at some corporate event. "Are you sure she's quite a striking woman, difficult to forget?" "I'm absolutely sure," replied Matthew, returning the photo with a disinterested expression. "I live on this farm with my daughter and few employees. We rarely receive visitors." Charles Edward didn't seem convinced. He took a business card from his pocket, placing it on the coffee table. "If by chance you meet this woman or know of her whereabouts, please get in touch. There's a substantial reward for information leading to her." "Reward? I thought it was just a legal matter for the company." "And it is. But Ms. Davis fled taking confidential information that could seriously compromise the construction company. It's a matter of corporate security." Matthew felt anger growing inside him. This man was blatantly lying, trying to paint Victoria as a dangerous criminal, when in reality she was the victim in this whole story. "As I said, I can't help you. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a lot of work to do." The lawyer made as if to say something more, but seemed to change his mind. With a nod, he headed to the door, not without first casting an evaluative look around, as if searching for signs of Victoria's presence. "Thank you for the coffee, Mr. Richards. I'll be staying at the town inn for the next few days, in case. You remember anything?" Matthew accompanied him to the car, watching as he departed down the dirt road that led to the farm's exit. Only when the vehicle disappeared around the bend did he allow himself to breathe relieved and look for Victoria. He found her in the stable, trembling uncontrollably while caressing Serena. Her face was as pale as paper, her eyes wide with panic. "He's gone," said Matthew, embracing her tightly. "He was a lawyer from the construction company. He's looking for you, but I told him I didn't know you." "They found me, Matthew," she whispered, her voice choked with fear. How? How did they find me here? I don't think they know for certain. He said he's visiting all properties in the region, following leads. It may just be a random search. But Victoria wasn't convinced. The panic she had felt in the first days of her flight returned with full force, suffocating her. I have to leave. Now. If I stay, I'll put you and Lucy in danger. Don't be absurd. You did nothing wrong. There's no reason to run again. You don't understand, Matthew. She pulled away, her eyes revealing a deep desperation. Richard Montgomery isn't just trying to frame me for fraud. He fears I may have evidence against him, that I could expose his schemes. As long as I'm missing, I'm a threat. He'll do anything to find me. Then we fight, Victoria. Together. We hire lawyers, seek evidence, clear your name. With what money? Against the economic power of the Montgomery family. It would be a battle lost before it even began. Night fell over Hope Farm like a heavy and suffocating cloak. Inside the main house, the silence was broken only by the ticking of the old clock in the living room and Mrs. Zelda's occasional sigh as she prepared a calming tea in the kitchen. Lucy was already in bed, oblivious to the emotional storm unfolding among the adults. Victoria paced back and forth in the library, her nervous steps marking the wooden floor. Matthew observed her from the armchair, trying to find words that could calm that turmoil. I need to leave tonight, she finally decided, stopping before the window that overlooked the garden. The longer I stay, the greater the risk for all of you. And where will you go? With what money? What kind of life will you have, always running, always looking over your shoulder? Victoria had no answers to these questions. She only knew that she couldn't bear to see Matthew and Lucy involved in the consequences of her problems. The simple idea of Richard Montgomery discovering her feelings for them and using this against her was unbearable. Maybe I could go up north, to some remote place where nobody knows me. I can work at anything, start from zero. And us, Lucy and me, do we just forget you existed? Go on with our lives as if these months meant nothing? The pain in Matthew's voice was palpable, making Victoria face for the first time the real impact her departure would have. It wasn't just her life that would be shattered again, but theirs as well. What do you suggest then? That I stay and wait until that lawyer returns with the police? Until Lucy sees me being taken away in handcuffs? Until your name is dragged through the mud along with mine? Matthew stood up, approaching her with firm steps. He held her face between his hands, forcing her to look at him. I suggest we fight, that we face this together with our heads held high. You're innocent, Victoria, and the truth, however difficult it may be to prove, has a strength of its own. She wanted to believe, wanted desperately to cling to that hope he offered, but fear, a constant companion since her life had crumbled in New York, whispered insistently that it was impossible, that it was just a naive dream. I can't risk it, she finally said, moving away from him. I'll pack my things. And leave today, it's better this way. Matthew watched her walk to the door, powerless in the face of her determination. When she was about to leave the library, he said, If you cross that door with the intention of running, Victoria, you'll be proving them right. You'll be confirming the guilt they're trying to place on you. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. She stopped, her back to him, her hand suspended on the doorknob. Sometimes running is the only option, she replied, her voice choked. Do you really believe that? The woman I've gotten to know these months, the woman I fell in love with, wouldn't be defeated so easily. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face. How could he understand her so well and at the same time not comprehend the terror she felt? It wasn't just for herself that she feared, but for him, for Lucy, for everything that they had built together. Give me at least until tomorrow, Matthew pleaded, approaching again. One night to think of alternatives, to make some phone calls. I have friends in New York, people who can help us. She hesitated. One night wouldn't change much, she thought, and maybe there was a way out that she couldn't see in her desperation. All right, she finally agreed. Until tomorrow. That was one of the longest nights in Victoria's life. Lying in the bed that had become hers over the last months, she tossed and turned restlessly, unable to find sleep. Images of the past and present mixed in her mind. The office at the construction company, Richard's triumphant face when he accused her, the barn where Matthew had found her, Lucy's shy smile, afternoons on the porch. Around 3 in the morning, tired of fighting against insomnia, she got up and went to the window. The night was clear, with a full moon that bathed the landscape in silver. The farm, so alive during the day, rested in an almost sacred silence. How could she abandon all of this? How could she leave behind the 2 people who had become her world? A sudden noise of an engine broke the silence of the early morning. Victoria stiffened, alert. Looking through the window, she saw a car approaching on the main road, headlights cutting through the darkness. Her heart raced. Could it be the lawyer returning? The police? She dressed hastily and left the room. In the hallway, she met Matthew, also awakened by the noise. "Stay here," he said, heading for the stairs. "I'll see who it is." "I'm coming with you," she decided, following him. They descended together, the tension palpable between them. When they reached the porch, the car was already parked in the yard. It was a simple model, different from the lawyer's luxury vehicle. The driver's door opened, and a female figure emerged from the darkness. "Matthew Richards," called the woman. Approaching the house. "That's me," he replied cautiously. "Who are you?" "My name is Caroline Torres. I'm an investigative journalist with The Truth newspaper. I need to speak with Victoria Davis. It's urgent." Victoria felt her blood freeze in her veins. How did this woman know she was here? Had the lawyer discovered something and alerted the press? "I don't know any Victoria Davis," replied Matthew, repeating the same lie he had told the lawyer. The journalist sighed, apparently expecting that response. "I know she's here, Mr. Richards, and I haven't come to expose her or cause problems. On the contrary, I have information that can help her." Victoria exchanged a look with Matthew. Could they trust this stranger who appeared in the middle of the night? Was it a trap? "How did you find me?" she finally asked, stepping forward. Caroline smiled, visibly relieved to have found who she was looking for. "I've been following the case from the beginning. I always suspected the official version about the embezzlement at Sunrise Construction. I have sources inside the company who told me about the lawyer visiting properties in this region. I got your exact location through an employee at the inn, where he's staying." "And why should we trust you?" questioned Matthew. "Because I have proof," replied the journalist simply, taking a flash drive from her pocket. "Documents, emails, recordings that prove Richard Montgomery set up the whole situation to frame Victoria. And more importantly, I have a witness willing to testify. Someone from inside the construction company who can't stand being part of the farce anymore." Victoria felt her legs weaken. Proof? A witness? It was more than she had ever dared to hope for. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because it's my job to expose the truth, and because I know the Montgomerys' reputation. It's not the first time they've used their power to destroy innocent people." They spent the rest of the night in the kitchen, with Caroline explaining in detail what she had discovered. According to her, Richard Montgomery had embezzled millions in a complex scheme of overcharging for public works. When he realized that Victoria, responsible for finances, was beginning to notice discrepancies, he decided to eliminate her from the picture, fabricating evidence to incriminate her. The witness was Maria Claire, Richard's personal secretary, who had been silently witnessing the irregularities for years, out of fear, but who had finally decided to speak up. "With this evidence and Maria Claire's testimony, we can not only clear your name, Victoria, but put Richard behind bars," concluded Caroline. The sun was already rising when they finished the conversation. Victoria felt simultaneously exhausted and electrified. It was as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her shoulders, replaced by an almost painful hope in its intensity. "What happens now?" asked Matthew, holding Victoria's hand on the table. "Victoria needs to return to New York with me," replied Caroline. "We have a meeting scheduled with Detective Henry Matthews from the Financial Crimes Department. He's already aware of the case and has guaranteed protection for both Victoria and Maria Claire throughout the process. I'm going with you," Matthew decided immediately. "You can't," protested Victoria. "What about Lucy, the farm?" "Lucy can stay with Mrs. Zelda for a few days. The farm survives without me for a week. What doesn't survive is my heart if you face this alone." The determination in his eyes left no room for arguments, and truth be told, Victoria didn't really want to dissuade him. The idea of having Matthew by her side while she faced her demons was comforting. When Lucy woke up hours later, she found the adults in the living room, still discussing details of the plan. Caroline had left briefly to get fresh coffee from town and call her contacts in New York. "What's happening?" asked the girl, noticing the serious expressions and the half-packed suitcases in the corner of the room. Victoria and Matthew exchanged looks, unsure about how to explain the situation to a child. Finally, Victoria approached, kneeling to be at eye level with Lucy. "Remember when we talked about your mom? About how sometimes bad things happen that we can't control?" Lucy nodded, her eyes fixed on Victoria's. "Well, something bad happened to me before I came to the farm. Some people lied about me, said I did bad things that I didn't do. And now your dad and I need to go to New York to resolve this, to show the truth. Are you leaving?" The girl's voice was filled with fear, her eyes beginning to well with tears. "Only for a few days," assured Victoria, holding Lucy's little hands in hers, "and then I'll return. I promise." Pinky promise? Lucy extended her pinky, a gesture they had shared a few times when the girl wanted special guarantees. "Pinky promise," confirmed Victoria, intertwining her little finger with the girl's. She felt a lump in her throat as she perceived the absolute trust in the child's eyes. She would not disappoint her. When Caroline returned, preparations for the trip were quickly concluded. Mrs. Zelda, informed of the situation, assured them she would take care of Lucy as if she were her own granddaughter. The farewell was emotional, with the girl clinging to Victoria as if fearing she might disappear at any moment. "Remember the promise," whispered Lucy in Victoria's ear during the last hug. "I'll never forget," she replied, kissing the top of the girl's head. On the way to New York, as Caroline's car cut through the increasingly urbanized landscape, Victoria oscillated between fear and hope. On one hand, she feared the imminent confrontation, the accusations, the legal system that might be manipulated in favor of the powerful. On the other, she felt a renewed determination, fueled by Matthew's love and Lucy's, by Caroline's unexpected support, by the prospect of finally clearing her name and rebuilding her life. "What are you thinking about?" asked Matthew, noticing her gaze lost in the landscape rapidly passing by the window. "About how strange destiny is," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. "A few months ago, I thought my life was over. Now, even in the face of so much uncertainty, I feel I'm just beginning to truly live." Matthew smiled, squeezing her hand affectionately. "No matter what happens in New York, Victoria, we have each other, and we have a home to return to." New York received Victoria with its usual frenzy, the chaotic traffic, the pollution, the incessant noise, people rushing through the streets. For someone who had spent the last months in the bucolic quietness of Hope Farm, the city seemed even more oppressive and suffocating than in her memories. Matthew, who rarely visited the metropolis, observed everything with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. Caroline took them directly to a discreet hotel in the Brooklyn neighborhood, far from the major business centers where Victoria might be recognized. There, in a simple but comfortable room, the three reviewed once again every detail of the plan for the next day. "The meeting with Detective Matthews is scheduled for 10 a.m., explained Caroline, consulting her notes. "Maria Claire will meet us directly at the police station. She's in a safe location until then." "What about the lawyer who showed up at the farm?" asked Matthew, concerned. "If he discovered where Victoria was—" "It was probably just a coincidence," reassured Caroline. "My sources tell me that Sunrise Construction is sending people to various regions near New York. They're desperate to find her before we can present the evidence." Victoria remained silent, absorbing each piece of information. Part of her still couldn't believe she was really there, about to confront the man who had destroyed her life. The documents and recordings Caroline had gathered were substantial, but the Brazilian judicial system was notoriously slow and often influenced by power and money. Would it be enough? "Are you okay?" asked Matthew, noticing her distant expression. "Just nervous," she admitted, trying to smile. Tomorrow could be the beginning of my redemption, or... Everything will be fine, he assured, embracing her. We're all on your side now. You're no longer alone in this fight. That night, while Matthew slept exhausted from the trip, Victoria remained awake, mentally reviewing everything she would need to say and do the next day. Her testimony would be crucial, as would her ability to explain in detail how Richard Montgomery had manipulated documents and transactions to incriminate her. Years of experience as a financial director would finally be useful not to generate profits, but to unmask an injustice. At times, her thoughts flew to Lucy and Hope Farm. Was the girl doing well? Would she miss her? And if something went wrong and she couldn't fulfill her promise to return? The simple idea was too painful to contemplate. Morning arrived with a fine, persistent rain, typical of New York spring. Victoria dressed carefully, opting for a sober outfit that Caroline had brought. Nothing too elegant that might refer to her old corporate life, but something respectable enough for an official meeting. Matthew, perceiving her anxiety, held her trembling hands as she tried to apply a little makeup. "Breathe deeply," he said gently. "Remember who you are. Remember that the truth is on your side." The specialized financial crimes precinct was in a modern building in the city center. Caroline guided them through the corridors with the familiarity of someone who regularly frequented the place in search of stories. Detective Henry Matthews, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a serious expression, awaited them in his office, along with a woman Victoria immediately recognized, Maria Clare, Richard Montgomery's secretary. "Ms. Davis," greeted the detective, extending his hand. "We finally meet. Ms. Torres has told me a lot about your case." The following hours were intense. Victoria gave a detailed testimony, explaining how she had noticed irregularities in the construction company's accounts and how, upon discreetly questioning, she had become Richard's target. Maria Clare, visibly nervous but determined, confirmed everything and added crucial information. Emails that Richard had ordered her to delete, suspicious meetings with politicians responsible for bids, explicit instructions to falsify documents that would incriminate Victoria. Caroline, in her role as an investigative journalist, presented the evidence she had collected over the months: bank statements showing suspicious transfers, recordings of compromising conversations, internal documents from the construction company that had been leaked by anonymous sources. "Based on everything I've heard and seen today," concluded Detective Matthews after almost 4 hours of testimonies, "we have sufficient elements not only to reopen your case, Ms. Davis, but also to initiate a formal investigation against Richard Montgomery and possibly other executives at Sunrise Construction." Victoria felt a wave of relief so intense that her legs weakened. Matthew, always attentive, supported her discreetly. "How long until my name is officially cleared?" she asked, her voice choked with emotion. "Legal processes take time," warned the detective, "but I can guarantee that from today on you are no longer considered a fugitive. I'll issue an official document attesting to your cooperation with the investigations and suspending any arrest warrant against you." It was more than Victoria had dared to hope for in a single day. When they left the precinct, already in the early afternoon, the rain had given way to a timid sun that seemed to symbolize the change in her fortune. "We've taken the first step," celebrated Caroline, hugging her. "Now comes the fun part, publishing the story and watching the Montgomerys try to explain themselves to the press." "I don't want revenge," replied Victoria sincerely. "I just want my life back." "And you'll have it," assured the journalist. "But Richard needs to pay for what he did, not just for you, but so he doesn't do the same to other people." In the days that followed, while they remained in New York awaiting developments, the story exploded in the media. Caroline published a detailed report in The Truth, which was soon replicated by other outlets. Victoria's name, previously associated with fraud accusations, now appeared as a victim of a corporate conspiracy. Sunrise Construction issued an official statement denying the accusations, but the damage was done. Company shares plummeted. Investors began asking uncomfortable questions. Politicians previously close to the Montgomery family now distanced themselves rapidly. Richard Montgomery, in a desperate attempt to contain the damage, called a press conference where he vehemently denied any irregularity and promised to sue Victoria and Caroline for defamation. His usual arrogance, however, seemed shaken. His eyes, once always confident, now showed the fear of someone watching his empire begin to crumble. On the 5th day after the testimonies, Matthew received a call from Mrs. Zelda. Lucy had a high fever and was constantly calling for Victoria. The news fell like a bucket of cold water on both of them. "We need to go back," Victoria decided immediately. "Lucy needs us." "But what about the process?" "The investigations are still ongoing," reminded Matthew, torn between concern for his daughter and fear of interrupting the legal advances. "Detective Matthew said I can be summoned again if necessary, but that my constant presence isn't mandatory at this stage," she argued. "Besides, I made a pinky promise to Lucy, and pinky promises are sacred." The decision was made. After a final meeting with the detective and Caroline, where they arranged the details for future communications, they caught the first available bus to the Hudson Valley. The return journey was silent, each immersed in their own thoughts. Victoria looked out the window, watching the urban landscape gradually give way to fields and mountains. It was as if each mile traveled relieved a bit of the weight on her shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" asked Matthew, noticing her contemplative look. "About how life takes turns," she replied, smiling. "When I fled New York months ago, I was desperate, directionless, hopeless. Now, I'm returning to a place I've learned to call home, to people I love, and with the real prospect of a future." "A future together," he completed, holding her hand. "Together," she agreed, feeling a quiet certainty settle in her heart. When they finally arrived at Hope Farm, it was already night. The lights of the main house were on, creating a welcoming beacon in the rural darkness. They had barely gotten out of the taxi that had brought them from the bus station when the door opened and Mrs. Zelda appeared, with Lucy in her arms, wrapped in a blanket. "Victoria," shouted the girl upon seeing her extending her arms, "you came back." Victoria ran to her, taking her in her arms and hugging her tightly. "Of course I came back, my love. I made a pinky promise, remember?" Lucy smiled, despite her cheeks flushed with fever. "I missed you, and Dad too." "We missed you very much too," said Matthew, embracing both of them. "But now we're home, all together." Mrs. Zelda, with tears in her eyes, observed the emotional scene. "Thank God you're back. This house isn't the same without you." In the days that followed, while they took care of Lucy, who soon recovered with the joy of their return, Victoria and Matthew established a new routine. Every morning they checked the news to follow the developments of the case in New York. Caroline kept them informed by phone about each new development. The investigation against Richard Montgomery was advancing rapidly, with new witnesses emerging, encouraged by Maria Claire's example. The Sunrise construction empire was beginning to crumble under the weight of revelations. 1 week after their return, on a sunny afternoon, Matthew took Victoria back to the hill where they had declared their love for the first time. The view remained magnificent, the farm spreading below them, the verdant fields, the river in the distance. But now, without the weight of uncertainty, without the shadow of persecution, the landscape seemed even more beautiful. "Do you remember the last time we were here?" he asked, embracing her from behind as they contemplated the view. "How could I forget? It was when you told me this farm could be my permanent home." "And then, on the same day, everything seemed to fall apart," he recalled. "But now we're back, stronger." Matthew gently turned her to face him. His eyes, always sincere, now shone with a deep emotion. "Victoria, when Julia left, I thought I would never feel again what I'm feeling now. I spent years building walls around my heart, convinced it was better that way, safer. And then you literally fell into my life." She smiled, remembering that rainy night in the barn. "The last months have been the happiest I've had in a long time," he continued, "not just for me, but for Lucy too. You brought light back into our lives. And now that your name is being cleared, that your future is opening up again before you, I need to ask, do you want to build that future here with us?" Victoria's heart accelerated. It was the question she had secretly been waiting for, that she wanted to hear. "Are you proposing to me, Matthew Richards?" she teased, smiling through tears of emotion. "I'm asking for much more than that," he replied seriously. "I'm asking you to be my life partner, to be a mother to Lucy, to make Hope Farm your project as much as it is mine, that we grow together, that we age together, that we face together everything that destiny places in our path." Victoria didn't need to think twice. In her heart, the answer had been clear for a long time. "Yes," she said simply, before kissing him with all the passion and certainty she felt. As the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, they sealed that promise with a kiss that spoke of new beginnings, of second chances, of bright futures born from the ashes of painful pasts. 3 months later, Hope Farm was unrecognizable. Colorful, banners decorated the path from the main house to the great centennial oak that stood at the center of the property. Carefully arranged tables were spread across the lawn, covered with white tablecloths and arrangements of wildflowers. A small, improvised altar awaited under the generous shade of the tree. It was Victoria and Matthew's wedding day. Friends, family, and neighbors had gathered to celebrate not just the union of two people, but the triumph of love over adversity, of truth over lies, of hope over despair. Lucy, dressed in a delicate light blue dress, carried the rings with an expression of solemnity and happiness that moved everyone. Mrs. Zelda, openly crying, took pride in the transformation she had witnessed in that family over the past months. Among the guests, Carolyn Torres stood out, now a close friend, whose journalistic work had been fundamental to the turnaround in Victoria's life. By her side, Detective Henry Matthews, who had made a point of attending, brought encouraging news. Richard Montgomery had been formally indicted for fraud, document falsification, and obstruction of justice. The investigation continued, but the truth was finally coming to light. When Victoria walked to the altar, radiant in a simple but elegant dress, all eyes turned to her. But she only had eyes for Matthew and Lucy, who awaited her under the oak, their faces illuminated by smiles that reflected the sun itself. The justice of the piece's words, the exchange of vows, the rings sliding onto fingers, everything seemed to happen in a luminous dream. When they were finally declared husband and wife, the applause that erupted from the small crowd seemed to celebrate not just that union, but the very human capacity to overcome obstacles and find happiness in the most unexpected places. The celebration that followed was cheerful and relaxed, with plentiful food, live music, and much dancing. However, at a certain point, Victoria discreetly slipped away from the celebration, walking to the old barn where everything had begun. She wanted a moment of silence, of reflection, to fully absorb the magnitude of what her life had become. The barn was as it had been that night: wooden ladder, hay bales, sweet and comforting smell. But Victoria was no longer the same. The frightened and desperate woman who had sought shelter there months ago had given way to a strong, loved, fulfilled woman, a woman who had faced her fears, who had fought for justice, who had found a home and a family when she least expected. "I thought I'd find you here," said Matthew, entering the barn. "Lucy is looking for you. She wants you to help her pick flowers, to make a crown." Victoria smiled, feeling her heart overflow with gratitude and love. "I'm coming. I just wanted to remember, understand how we got here." Matthew approached, embracing her by the waist. "Destiny? Coincidence? Who knows? The important thing is that we arrived, and that now we have the whole future ahead of us." "A future at Hope Farm," she completed, resting her head on his shoulder. "A perfectly fitting name, don't you think?" "Perfectly," he agreed, kissing her softly. "Now let's go. Our daughter is waiting." Our daughter. The words sounded like music to Victoria's ears. Together they left the barn and walked back to the celebration, to the life they had built, to the future that opened before them. Bright, promising, and full of hope. Dear listeners, we hope that Victoria and Matthew's journey has touched your hearts. From despair to redemption, their story reminds us that life always offers second chances, to those who have the courage to start anew. To continue being moved by equally captivating narratives, we've prepared a special playlist with stories that explore the highs and lows of human experience. Find it here clicking to the left. If this story awakens something in you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give that special like. Daily we bring content that inspires, moves, and makes you reflect.